The school in Ydby is called the degn. Degn is probably more like clerk, and it originates probably in the cluster, and later it has been separated out as a separate institution. What complex things a little here is that the parish of Ydby is, for the priests concerned, the priest shares 3 parishes, which is Ydby and Bodum and Hurup. However, the clerk does not do the same. He is typically only for Ydby and Bodum, the clerk for these, and sometimes only for Ydby, and then another one in Bodum, and a third one in Hurup. That's a little messed up, but this chart is supposed to kind of clarify a little bit on this one, and you will see to the right that it has been successful to locate these people on the website degn, for the family trees related to these people. However, some of them, even they have very rare names, it has not been able to locate them and build a tree around them. So there's much work to be done here. On the next pictures, you will see the old drawings from 1794. So what is that? More than 225 years ago, where you clearly see the church located there, and then just south of it in Tvolm, you have located the school. The school has both the residence of the clerk, the degn, and as well as a room for the children. And you will see that the children probably is engaged in a little farming out there and learning about a variety of things. Maybe they were doing some, we can imagine they will do some spelling for the vegetables and animals and things. We do see evidence that most people will attend this school because in the at the court, which is located just south of this town, lots of the local ones will sign their own name, even from the 1600s. So in the 16 and 1700, it's fair to imagine that most people could write at least the first 2 letters of their name, meaning the capital letter of their first name and second name, which means their father's name. And but most of them would be able to write and read. And we can also see from the evidence they have books, typically Psalm and Bibles, in their estate when they died. Skibstedgård is this beautiful building complex here with thatched roof and up on top of the hill, nested in a valley leading down to Skibsted Fjord, which carried its name. And it has been located here and in basically same format for at least 300 years and likely more than 400 years, with the residence at the top of the hill and the barn and the stables and so on down the hill, where the water comes out from the small riviere and makes sure that the horses and the cows and everybody has some fresh water enough there. And in the next video, there is a review, 360 in this courtyard. And as you can see, it looks very much like the picture before, which is from about year 1900. And the interesting thing is that the setup on the old photo here with about 10 people is about the same amount of people for 400 years, and likely very much the same structure with almost about 3 generations, where the older generations has the strength to still run the place. The new generation has children and thereby grandchildren. And then the servants running the business. The farmlands are not too big, just big enough to run a big estate, but not big enough to become very wealthy to that extent. Not at all. You will need to provide additional funds beyond that of the farming and fishing to ensure the farm is running. Also, we see here the ownership for a few hundred years here. And typically the family stays for about 2 generations, about 60 years, and then a new owner moves in. That owner may be related or may not be related to the existing family. And there's a turnus like that, and that has been like this for 400 years. The next drawing here shows the farmland around the estate. They always include the nearby few hundred yards. Typically, this estate owns additional lands in the hinterland, but these lands are farmed by some other people and leased out to local tenants, and they will use this farmland and generate income for Skibsted Kår. Famously, Skibsted Fjord was the location of the attack on England by Knud the Great for 1,000 years ago, where maybe as much as several hundred Viking ships with thousands of warriors were located here, and they nested in the Skibsted Fjord for a few months, and it became too late during the autumn, so they had to go back and harvest, and they were taken to court for abandoning their duties and so on and so forth. But that's another story for another time. Dover Kil is located in Dover, of course, in Ydby, and has a not too complex owner history. Typically, it was Ydby Abbey who owned it, and then later it turned into ownership by the tenant, and so on and so forth. Typically, Dover Kil has been separated into 2 farms, separated by a road leading through, and 2 full complex of farms in quadrangle. The western part, of course, Dover Kil West, and the eastern part, naturally, what it is. So these maps simply shows the division of the place into 2, and you also have an elderly picture there showing the thatched roof and the clay and timber work there. It's quite a tall structure on the left, unusually tall. It can still be seen today, located at the road. It says 1527 on it. I'm not sure it's that old. It can also be very, very much older. Interesting enough, the rocks, the stone at the base of the building is, and also the erected one in the front there, has a sort of specific surface to it, a chip away rock, which is also found at Skibsted around the entire building complex there, and in particular up at the residence, and also in the church dike. There's a few there, a suspicion could be these stone came from the ancient monuments up in Tvolm and the other Bronze Age places, but that can probably not be proved at this time. Holmgård, just south of Ydby, has a more complex owner structure, but still it's like in half and quarters. So typically there is one owner, Vestervig Abbey, and then four different tenants on the four different areas. Though in the beginning it is a mill which has the one of the quarters. And this chart is supposed to show from 1612 to about 1760 some of the tenants and some of the owners. The next the next chart indicates the owner structure around 1794, and there we can see new owners has arrived. It's a whole new structure. On the next drawing here, we see the lake, which is kind of what probably has created the location of this farm. Holm may be a reference to the other Holm, Thyholm. So when we have the town or the small hilltop called Tvolm, that might be two Holms. Tve meaning two or twice. It's hidden in the English word twice. And this Holm has then been a very old and very large farm. We can still see the lake. It's called Mill Lake, Møllesøen. And it looks like the channel for the mill is to the north side, and because it is broken with a bridge there. So likely these buildings to the north, it also says Michael Miller, just there at the lake. And then the large farm to the south called number 1 is probably the original farm. And then it has been subdivided into 2. So number 2 is just part of the old farm, separated out. Refstorp, located very north in Ydby in Flarup, has typically been a single farm with one owner and one tenant. There has been a time where the Refstorp was a crown horse grazing area owned by the crown, probably because of financial problems at Viborg Hospital, it seems, who owned it in 1680. It could be someone else. And then later it was sold from the crown again to Grevenkorb. I believe he was a general in the army. There has been a couple of tenants at the same time, I would think, but that's not what we see here. We only see one tenant at a time, and it's a medium-sized farm at this time. There is a drawing here indicating most of the area, and another one showing the buildings close to a tiny lake. Our story from Ydby takes place around January 1st, 1730 in Dover Kil, which is situated between Ydby and Bodum, and it's an area which today is mostly grown over, and also there has been built a dam with a bridge right through this keel. But the map here shows the original situation around 1780, so 50 years after the fact. The story is quite detailed and contains a few dates which can confuse everybody, but it is taking place, the court hearing is taking place on the 7th. The site review on the 5th, and the accident on the 1st of January in the evening. And what we have is the court documents, so all is from the court. And what it seems to have happened is that Mr. Christensen Graver, means digger, or the person who is performing burials, or maybe digging, tør. We don't know, but he obviously drowned at night under a storm there, and the community has been unsure if he was drunk with his friend who was in the boat, or they have had an argument prior to the accident, so they want to clear if it was solely an accident, and they want to clear this by asking everybody in the community what they heard, what they saw, and whatever happened. So here we go. From the Tinkbo, I read from it directly. In the name of Jesus, on Saturday, January 7th, 1730, an extra court was held in Jens Gunnarsson's house in Bodum Parish after the noble and well-born Kaptajn Thor to Bodum Bisgaard. His sheriff, Jacob Andersen, and his petition, where the court was served by the bailiff Senior Niels Winter and the clerk Lars Humle. As well, there was accused 4 defendants, Christian Jensen, Krabbe Thomsen, Jens Thomsen, and Niels Thomsen, alle from Bodum. I don't think they were accused. I think they were the witnesses. Mr. Jacob Andersen of Bodum Bisgaard appeared and produced 4 synsmænd. 4 trusted men to review the dead body. These people were Christian Bach in Svolum, Christian Visby, and Isaac Andersen in Ydby, as well as Christian Andersen Mose of Bodum. And they performed the oath according to the law and the book, and raised their fingers that it was trustworthy what they said, and they told the court that an inspection had taken place on the 5th of January and was carried out on behalf of the court over the dead body. And they did that on the 5th. So in the royal bailiff, Herr Niels Winter, in his legal absence on that date, and on behalf of the court, Thomas Larsen of Ydby, with the foresaid 4 unbiased Danish men, they examined the dead body of blessed Christian Christensen Graver, who by an unfortunate event and misfortune must have drowned outside Dover Kil before the evening of January the 1st, at the end of the year, when together with Jens Lassen of Bodum in the evening with a small boat in a legal errand, rowed straight across to Dover land And as the rovers were on the way home, must have been attacked by God's weather. So to save themselves, stood up in the boat to use the necessary hat, etc., for rescue, and in the same moment shall have overturned into the fjord immediately out of Bodum land. And on the land where he was found on January 3rd, he was brought home to Jens Gunnarsson's house in Bodum, and the body has been carefully examined and grandly and inspected, and was found as follows. They removed his kirtle and all his clothes onto the bare body, which was now dry and cleanly washed. And in no places of the body they found anything. So they did find some small aquatic animals called red lice, which has bitten him on the lips and ears. But there was nothing else to see on his whole body, on his flesh or his clothes. No spots, tears, or anything suspicious in any way. So they conclude he is drowned in the water. And that is their final testimony. Next, the judge produced another person, and that was Enevold Pedersen, living in Dover Kil. And the Ydby is the one which is kind of protruding out in Dover Kil. And that he, on New Year's Eve's day, around New Year's Day's evening, around 6 p.m., the deceased Christian Christensen Graver and Jens Lauritsen is his pal in the boat, were at the same place at Dover Kil, staying inside the witness house, where the deceased lit his tobacco pipe on fire, and there he got a beer for a shilling, and then enjoyed absolutely no further drinking in his house. And Jens Lauritsen, who was with him, enjoyed nothing at all, and were otherwise both themselves in the witness house sober and decent, as well as good friends and everything in order. So it was when they left again. But the witness did notice there was a big gale from the southwest, so hard and severe later, that his wife complained for both of them, who were on the waters in such harsh weather, and feared for them. And that was his testimony. The day they didn't hear anything about these two people before the next day that he heard Christian Graver has drowned. The next witness to appear is Mads Persson of Dover. He comes from close to Sund, the sound between the adjacent island of Mors. And he, around 10 o'clock at night, received Jens Lauritsen, and according to his mother account, they should have come ashore below their mark with a small boat called a Harl or something like this. I'm not sure what boat type it is, because I can't decipher in the Tinkbo which type it is, Brohale or something like this. It might be a boat looking like this, which is down beside Dover today. But this Mads Pedersen, he is referring his mother's account, what he has told him, so he's referring this in the court. Obviously, his mother did not show up. The next witness is Karen Jensdatter, and she is talking about what happened when Jens Lauritsen, who survived, came to her house later that night. So she explains to the court that on the night of New Year's Day Eve, around 10 or 10:30, Jens Lauritsen came to the witness in her house and informed her that Christensen Gravers, whom he had accompanied on New Year's Eve, had gone and fell into the water and drowned at Dover Kil due to a strong gale of wind which had come upon them on the water, and explained that what happened was that Christensen Graver wanted to help himself to a raft which lay in the boat, and raised himself up to do that. And he at that moment had nothing to hold on to, and he fell backwards out of the boat on his back in the water, and took the oar he had in the other hand with him in the water. And this is what Jens Lauritsen told her, that he had failed and he still had an oar with him. So Jens Lauritsen had to let himself drift back into the land further up north, close to her house, and that obviously had taken some hours. And she further talks about her sister's husband and so on and so forth. So it seems that Christensen Graver is her sister's husband. Jens Lauritsen himself now starts to tell his story, and that's the final story we have from this event. And he tells us that he went first to Bodum Church and was blessed with what is that? The words of the Lord. And he then took, with his friend Christian Christensen, took a so-called bridge haul, which is the boat, and rowed over to the northern land, and then went straight from there to the deceased, his wife's sister, Karen Jensdatter, living in Dover Vandmølle, and did their business there. Then went there to Kortegård, again in Dover, from where they followed each other to Enevold Persen, living on Dover Point and Dover Oil, where they both stayed. Then the deceased lit his tobacco pipe and drank a beer for a shilling. Then they went straight back to the boat that was lying outside Enevold Persen's hus, and then they were in the middle of Dover Kil waters when a great gale arose, where the deceased began to rise in the sea and wanted to reach Jens Lauritsen the oar he was rowing with, but at the same moment he just began to row, looking and moving in the boat. He fell backwards overboard on his back into the water, and the oar he was rowing with he took with him into the water. But because of the harsh weather, it was quite impossible for him to think about anything for fear and for his own life. And also without with only one oar, he was not able to push towards the wind with the stick. So he eventually drifted into the land underneath Sund. So he had been there from 6 to 10, so it was quite cold, I guess. But it looks like in his story, he is coming to Færgehuset on Nes land on the opposite side at 10 o'clock at night, where he talked to Peter Skaarup and his wife, who lived over there close to the Nes Sound. And they took a man and a little boy with them to the water and helped him to scoop the water from the boat and to put it out again with them so he could come over to Dover Mill again, where he then went up to the deceased wife's sister and told her how unlucky the things which has happened, and that her brother-in-law, Christian Christens, had drowned in Dover Kil. Then went from here to the boat again and went up to Bodum Bisgård, where he told his lordship about the accident, and then went back to his lodging in Bodum, as frozen he was. And that's the end of our story today.